Right, we can get started. The trickle in of folks have started to slow down. Well, thank you all for joining us today for the OR-MEP program update webinar. My name is Mecca Abraham, the OR-MEP program manager with TRC. We're looking forward to sharing these updates with you today. I know these program updates are long awaited, especially for projects currently on the wait list, and we really appreciate and thank you for your patience during this time. To get started, I wanted to provide a quick overview on how to participate today in Zoom. All attendees are currently in listen-only mode and muted. We do, however, want to hear from you if you have any questions. You can enter any questions via the Q&A button, and our plan is to take as many questions as we can at the end after we have completed our presentation. Any questions we don't get to will be addressed in our follow-up communication. And to enable captions, you can click on the Show Captions button. You can select the arrow up icon to select captions in English, as well as translated captions in another language as well. We are recording this webinar today, and we'll make the recording and a PDF of this presentation available on the OR-MEP website, and it will also be shared through email to the OR-MEP mailing list subscribers. Here is our planned agenda for today. We'll start off with a program recap and highlights from the past 5 years, and then move on to program updates, including the new open enrollment process and participation measure and incentive updates. We'll close things out with what to expect next, and are hoping to have at least 10 to 15 minutes remaining to address questions at the end. I'm joined by my colleagues today, Julia Sinek, who is the OR-MEP technical manager, who will share out on measure and incentive updates. Kristen Bellows, OR-MEP marketing manager, who is monitoring the Q&A box for questions and any technical issues you might run into. And also joined by Tim Clark, OR-MEP program manager from the OHCS side and state energy program coordinator. So let's jump into a recap of the Oregon Multifamily Energy Program that we refer to in short form as OR-MEP. OR-MEP is brought to you by Oregon Housing and Community Services. The program provides cash incentives and design support for energy efficiency upgrades in affordable multifamily retrofits and new construction. The program is funded through public purpose charge collected by the two main investor-owned electric utilities in the state, Pacific Power and Portland General Electric. The goal of OR-MEP is to reduce the energy burden for residents with limited incomes across multifamily affordable housing. We do this through promoting energy efficient building design with affordable housing owners and developers, and energy efficient building use with affordable housing residents. To be eligible for OR-MEP, projects must meet the following requirements: be an existing or new construction multifamily property with at least 5 residential units per building. There is an update to this requirement that Julia will share more about later. Receive electricity from Pacific Power or Portland General Electric. Be heated by a hardwired electrical heating system. And last is to meet program affordability requirements where residents in at least 50% of the units are at or below 80% area median income, and those units must remain affordable for at least 10 years. The OR-MEP in its current form was launched in 2018. In the 5-year duration from 2018 to 2022, we had $12 million available in incentive funding, and have been able to enroll more than 93 properties and 6,700 units with that funding. More than half of those properties are now complete with energy upgrades installed. I want to thank you all who have participated and enrolled projects in the program previously. We couldn't have had this level of participation without your commitment to the program. With that said, the interest in the program is very strong, which led us to needing to initiate a wait list almost 2.5 years ago in fall 2020, after we fully reserved the $12 million of program funding we had available. Since then, we have accumulated a wait list of more than 90 properties and 6,100 units. However, we are still anticipating similar funding levels of around $13 million from the public purpose charge over the next 5 years. And the reality is, based on previous participation, we would expend our 5-year funding availability with the current waitlist alone. We're also expecting, with even more investments being made in the state towards affordable housing, the demand for the program will increase further beyond our current waitlist volume. And as a result, the OR-MEP program team recognized that we needed to reassess the program's enrollment criteria and move away from our first come, first serve enrollment and shift towards a diversity, equity, and inclusion focus to prioritize projects with the highest need. With that said, we knew we couldn't do that alone among our program team and needed more diverse community perspective to find a solution. This is where the role of the OR-MEP DEI Coalition came into play. As some of you might recall, last January in 2022, we released the call for applications to form the OR-MEP DEI Coalition. The vision of the coalition is to recommend and influence changes to the OR-MEP program to make it more accessible to all, especially customers who spend the highest percentage of their income on energy costs. This includes customers of color, those for whom English is not their first language, customers living in rural communities, and those navigating low incomes. The objective of the coalition is to modify and develop OR-MEP policies and practices to eliminate systemic racism and to help the program team equitably engage with all applicable communities and customers. We formed the coalition in May 2022 last year. The coalition is led by a third-party facilitation team shown here. This was intended to reduce program team bias and influence entering into the conversation and to create a safe space for the coalition to have honest and real conversations without the program team present. Shown here is the group of 10 coalition members that started with us last year. These 10 members jumped into the role right away, diving deep into understanding the program and supporting the program team. They helped us co-create the open enrollment prioritization criteria that we'll be reviewing in a bit. We can't thank them enough for their participation and support over the past year. Speaking of the coalition, I will make a quick plug that we are actively recruiting for additional members to fill current gaps that we have listed here. The DEI Coalition is a paid position and members meet monthly for 2 hours. On average, members can expect to participate each month for at least 3 to 5 hours and up to 10 hours, depending on what's going on that month. If you're interested in joining the coalition or know someone in your network that's a good fit, please do visit the OR-MEP website listed here to learn more or apply. All right, with that, let's jump into the program updates, starting with the updated program summary in the program manual. First, we'll review the updated program summary to build off of the work of the DEI Coalition and the program team's prioritized focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion. Along with the coalition, we updated the OR-MEP program summary that is found in the program manual, and this was specifically to include a DEI focus. We wanted to be transparent and accountable as a program team. I won't read through the entire program summary and will instead call out some key new updates that are the highlighted sections shown here. First, I'll start off with the second paragraph that speaks to the program's purpose, which is a key update and states, the purpose of OR-MEP funding is to reduce the energy burden for low-income residents of Oregon through energy efficiency improvements and education in affordable multifamily housing, both existing buildings and new construction. The program targets to benefit residents who are navigating low income, people of color, those who are disproportionately impacted, those customers for whom English is not their first language, and those living in rural communities. The third paragraph is another key addition to formally establish the role of the OR-MEP DEI Coalition within the program rules, and states that the OR-MEP DEI Coalition will analyze, recommend, and influence changes to OR-MEP to make the program more accessible. The OR-MEP DEI Coalition is a team of community members from across the state to help OR-MEP incorporate diversity, equity, and inclusion in the program design, understand barriers to participation, and recommend modifications to the program and policies. This updated program summary really sets the tone for the future direction of the program, especially with regard to the new open enrollment process that I will talk about next. So as I shared earlier, with the demand and interest in the program, the OR-MEP enrollment process is shifting from a first come, first serve approach to one that is now competitive, with a new DEI-focused criteria to prioritize projects with the highest need. The open enrollment prioritization criteria was co-created between the program team and the DEI coalition, and the new enrollment process is called OR-MEP Open Enrollment. Open enrollment rounds are scheduled to be open twice annually every 6 months. Here, to the bottom left side is a table of the scoring categories and weighting. I'll be going over each of the 8 scoring criteria next, but you'll see there is prioritization towards serving BIPOC communities and residents, communities with high energy burden, rural communities, and especially naturally occurring affordable housing properties as well. On the right side, I also want to point out one key data source we use as a metric for scoring projects, especially for location-based criteria. And this is the 10-year plan for reducing the energy burden in Oregon affordable housing and the supplemental affordable housing assessment map that was created within that plan. The 10-year plan was created in 2019 by Oregon Housing and Community Services, Oregon Department of Energy, and Oregon Public Utilities Commission. And this was in response to the governor's executive order 1720. So here is an overview of the 5-year open enrollment funding calendar that we are proposing from 2023 to 2027. We plan to have funding rounds every 6 months to ensure equitable distribution of the current $14 million available in funding for the next 5 years. You'll see that we front-loaded funding in the first year, knowing that we have an existing wait list. And in the first round, we will have $2.5 million available, and based on historical per apartment unit incentive trends projects, we're targeting to enroll 825 units in the first round. The second table at the bottom notes the set-aside categories for round 1 for that $2.5 million, with an equal split among Pacific Power and Portland General Electric projects, and then another equal split among new construction and existing multifamily properties. So if you have a potential project, you might be asking yourself, should I apply for open enrollment funding round 1? We encourage projects to apply for this round if your project meets the following prerequisites if you are selected for OR-MEP funding in this open enrollment round. The first is that the project will finalize development of the energy efficiency scope to reserve incentives within 6 months of open enrollment selection. The second prerequisite is that the project will install energy upgrades within 1 year of open enrollment selection. If your project is not yet ready to commit to these timelines, or you're awaiting confirmation of other funding sources to be able to confidently move forward, we ask that you wait for the next OR-MEP open enrollment round to apply. One example, if you have applied for an OHCS funding opportunity such as LIFT or LIHTC and are awaiting award notice, we ask that you wait to apply for the OR-MEP open enrollment until you have these funding sources confirmed, since we know that these are deciding factors of if a project can move forward. We want to be able to prioritize projects that are ready to move forward immediately after being selected, and projects with an uncertain viability to move forward takes away a spot from another project that could benefit from funding in this round. I will just note, OHCS will enforce these deadlines for any projects selected during open enrollment rounds. Project teams that show a repeated pattern of not meeting deadlines or not making progress to move forward may be disqualified from participating in future open enrollment rounds. Now I will go over each of the 8 prioritization criteria that will be scored. This first one, criteria number 1, looks at the location of the property in a BIPOC community. The score will be noted in the application based on the project's address provided. The data source is based on data found from the Affordable Housing Assessment Map, specifically related to ethnicity and race at the census tract level. And the intent of this criteria is to prioritize projects located in BIPOC communities. As an example, this property in Salem is located in a census tract with 21.1% BIPOC. And comparing against the table, this project falls in the 15 to 24% range and is eligible for 1 point. Criteria number 2 looks at how the project will serve BIPOC communities. And the score will be noted in application based on self-attestation by the applicant on the current percent of BIPOC residents for existing properties or anticipated percent of BIPOC residents for new construction. Applicants should make the selection to the best of their current knowledge and goals of the property and provide a brief narrative response on how you will ensure the selected percent of BIPOC residents will be met. And the intent of this criteria is to prioritize projects that are explicitly designed and located to address displacement of BIPOC residents and communities and to ensure underserved BIPOC communities are represented as residents. Depending on the percentage of BIPOC residents in the property, as shown in this table, a project can be eligible for up to 5 points. Criteria number 3 looks at a project's high priority area index score, which is a cumulative index assessing energy burden. This score will be noted in the application based on project address provided. The data source is based on data found in the Affordable Housing Assessment Map, specifically for high priority area index at the census tract level. And the intent for this criteria is to prioritize projects with high priority area index score, which is a metric that was created in the previously mentioned 10-year plan. This index was created to more easily identify locations in Oregon with the greatest energy burden. And it includes a measure of energy burden itself, along with other factors that are known to drive energy burden. This includes affordability hardship due to low-income household income, which is an economic driver, core home energy efficiency due to the home vintage, which is a physical driver, and then finally, housing inequity issues due to ethnicity and race, which is a systemic driver. So in this example, the property located in Salem is located in a census tract with a high priority area index score of 2.75. And comparing against the table, this project falls in the 2 to 3 range and is eligible for 3 points. Criteria number 4 is if a project is in a rural area. The score will be noted in the application based on the project address provided, and this data is based on OHCS's definition of rural from the 2022 Qualified Allocation Plan. And the intent of this criteria is to prioritize projects in rural areas that are currently underserved by OR-MEP. And due to their location being away from urban centers, these projects are typically resource constrained due to high labor costs and workforce shortages compared to projects located in urban areas. So as an example, this property in Salem is not considered rural and based on the table would not be eligible for any points. Projects considered rural are eligible for 5 points. Criteria number 5 is for projects that are naturally occurring affordable housing, known by the program as NOAA properties. This is a yes or no response made by the applicant answering the question of, is this property currently unsubsidized rental housing with no active regulatory agreement with a federal, state, or local agency? The program defines NOAA properties as unsubsidized rental housing that is affordable to residents with incomes between 60 to 120% of the area median income. And these residents typically can pay no more than 30% of their income on rent and utilities. NOAA property owners have typically never participated in affordable housing programs. And the intent of this criteria is to prioritize naturally occurring affordable housing. And by enrolling in OR-MEP, NOAA properties agree to meet OR-MEP's affordability requirements by entering into a 10-year affordability agreement with OHCS, which will help preserve affordable housing in Oregon. Criteria number 6 looks at if the applicant entity is a nonprofit or housing authority. This is a simple yes or no response and eligible to 2 points for nonprofits or housing authorities. And the intent of this criteria is to prioritize nonprofits and housing authorities that are often more resource constrained than for-profit applicant entities. Criteria number 7 asks if this project is planned to be a highly energy efficient performing building, such as net zero energy or passive house design. This is also a yes or no response, with yes responses eligible for 2 points. Applicants who respond yes will need to describe how the project is planned to be high energy efficiency performing, such as meeting net zero or passive house certification levels, if that's being pursued, or detailing the type of energy upgrade the project is considering. The intent of this criteria is to prioritize projects that are going beyond to reduce the energy burden for residents by considering the highest energy efficiency building design. And the final criteria, number 8, is for first-time participation in OR-MEP and applicant entities that have never previously received OR-MEP funding. This is a simple yes or no response with 2 points available for first-time participants. So that covers all of the criteria that we are proposing in the open enrollment. Now that we've covered the criteria, I'll give a brief overview on the enrollment process. So what can you expect for the application submission process? Once open enrollment round 1 opens, we will have the application form available on the OR-MEP website, and it will be an electronic online submission. We also, along those lines, we have scheduled open enrollment to be open for 45 days. As you can see, hopefully from the 8 scored criteria questions, they are fairly direct and to align with our previous timeline expectations should align with decisions already known about the project. However, we do welcome your feedback on this 45-day timeline. We want open enrollment to be a quick process, but also want to ensure project teams feel prepared to respond within a 45-day enrollment period as well. What does the application review process look like? Applications in response to this open enrollment are reviewed and competitively ranked, and applications that have the highest scores within each set-aside category will be recommended for funding as allocated resources allow. So I know I went over a lot of information on the open enrollment process just now. As a reminder, we will make these slides available. I know there was more content on the slides than I had necessarily talked about. So we will share that in our post-webinar communication so you have all the details. Likewise, the full draft of the open enrollment framework that's shown in the screenshot on the right that includes the same information we went over today will be shared as well and posted on our website. And I'll just conclude to just highlight that open enrollment is now the first stage in the process to participate in OR-MEP, and only selected open enrollment applicants are eligible for the next program stages. to the right, like reserving incentives and installing upgrades, and those stages have not changed. So thank you all. I will now pass it off to Julia to talk about participation, measure, and incentive updates.
Thanks, Becca. So I'm going to be talking about the changes to the program participation requirements, as well as the measure and incentive updates on the menu and bundled path. Next slide, please. So picking up from where Mecca left off, once your project is selected during the open enrollment process, the participation process is staying pretty much the same, except for a handful of minor tweaks. So on a high level, you will submit your plans to us. We will review it and then issue an incentive reservation letter. And then once your construction is complete, then you'll submit the verification documents to us. And then after we confirm the final incentives, we'll pass you off to your OHCS production analyst to issue the incentive check. Next slide, please. So I want to first discuss what isn't changing and also give a quick overview of the program structure, just in case this is new to you. So we have 3 participation pathways, and they're designed to serve different levels of scope. And the pathways are the menu, bundled, and the whole building paths. So the menu and the bundled paths allow you to just select measures from a table of measures, and you receive incentives based on the quantity that you are installing. And so if you have 1 or 2 measures off of those lists, you qualify for the menu path. And then if you have 3 or more measures, you qualify for a higher incentive rate in the bundled path. And then your third option on the green on your right is the whole building path. And that one works differently in that the incentives for this pathway are based on the projected 1-year energy savings, which is calculated through energy modeling by a third-party energy consultant. And the incentives for that are up to $1 per kilowatt hour saved. Next slide, please. And switching now to what is changing. So early in this process for us, we spoke with several past participants and with some energy consultants, and we gathered some feedback to guide us on what changes we wanted to make that matter the most to you. And so today I'm only going to talk about some of the more significant changes, but you can find a comprehensive list in the summary of changes section in the published program manual, draft program manual, and it's on page 8 of the published PDF. Next slide, please. So I'm gonna start off with the changes to general eligibility requirements. So on your screen is a list of the eligibility requirements, and Mecca touched on them earlier. So I'm just going to focus on the 2 things that we are changing, and they're the changes are in green here. So first, as you know, we consider project as multifamily if it has 5 or more connected units. But moving forward, if you have a campus of 5 or more duplex, triplex, or quads, or any mix of them, it's now eligible to participate in OR-MEP. We still can't do standalone single family though. And then the other change is regarding projects that are already in construction. We wanted to accommodate projects that didn't have the opportunity to enroll with us just because we were on a wait list for a long time. And then also addressing projects moving forward that don't get selected during open enrollment in time for construction to start. So we are permitting projects to enroll even if they have started construction. However, we can't serve projects that already completed construction. Okay, next slide, please. So the next is about participation requirements that are changing. So first, we are rolling out something called milestone meetings. And milestone meetings are program required check-ins that will occur before and throughout construction. And during your enrollment process, we'll talk specifics for your project about when and what exactly we need to discuss at each of those milestone meetings. But the goal is for us to stay on the same page and address any changes that need to be made to your incentive reservation as early as possible. And then the other one is something that's going to be very popular, I know, which is we are no longer collecting invoices at completion. We still do need you to enter good faith estimates of costs in the energy efficiency plan. We just don't need the supporting documentation for that. Next slide, please. So the next few slides, we're going to be talking about changes to the menu and bundled path measure options. So first, we removed the point structure. So we're just listing measures as incentives per unit defined for that measure. And I just want to call attention to the fact that we changed some of the measure units. So just be careful when you're filling out the energy efficiency plan moving forward. And then next, we did away with the pre-made bundles in the bundled path. So now you just have to select 3 or more measures from the table of measures to qualify for the hired bundled path incentives. All right. So next is the measures themselves have changed somewhat drastically. But on a high level, we did try to increase the incentives wherever possible. There were a handful of measures where we did have to reduce incentives, mostly because code changed a lot. And then the market has also changed a lot in the last 5 years since we developed the original structure. We also introduced tiered incentives for some of the measures. And that means that you get higher incentives for the measure if you install a more efficient option. We also added a handful of new measures, such as central heat pump water heaters, energy efficient window ACs, as well as drain water heat recovery. And then another thing that we did was we ungrouped those new construction measures that were previously grouped together. And specifically, that's going to be the envelope measure, the ventilation measure, and the appliances. Lastly, we removed a couple of measures, and those are the low storm windows and the reduced infiltration measure. All right, next slide, please. So, okay, now I'm going to show you guys some examples. I want to mention that these the incentive dollar amounts may change a little bit between now and when the manual is published, just depending on the feedback that we receive. And then so we're starting here with existing buildings examples. So with ductless heat pumps, we're offering tiered incentives based on the heating efficiency of the DHPs. And we've also increased the incentives to help alleviate some of the inflationary pressures that everybody's been experiencing. And similarly for heat pump water heaters, we're also offering tiered incentives to reward higher efficiency models. And we're also offering incentives for central heat pump water heaters. The last example, we've added a new measure, which is Energy Star window ACs, and that's available for both existing buildings and for new construction. So next slide, please. And I'm gonna show you some new construction examples. So we took the same approach with the ductless heat pumps and the heat pump water heaters as we did in the existing building side. And then regarding that ungrouping of measures, when we reached out to folks to get feedback, the single most common feedback that we got was regarding continuous insulation, and it was required on the new construction envelope measure. So we are now offering cavity and continuous insulation incentives for walls and attics. Everything is going to be a separate measure. All right, next slide, please. So next, I'm going to introduce you to a new opportunity we're offering, and you can add one tailored measure to your menu or bundled path. And a tailored measure is for if you're installing something that saves electricity, but maybe it doesn't fit perfectly into one of the options that we've offered in the measure tables. So you can now add one measure that has proven energy savings and receive 70 cents per kilowatt hour of annual energy savings. So if you have a measure that doesn't really fit nicely with the available measures, talk to us about it, talk to your energy advisor about it, and we can help you determine if it's a viable measure to take this path, and we'll provide some technical assistance and point you to some resources to help you calculate the energy savings associated with it. All right, my next and last slide, please. Okay. Also, we are introducing 3 categories of bonus incentive. First, we're offering a bonus incentive for a rural bonus for Douglas heat pumps. We received a lot of feedback and saw that installing Douglas heat pumps in rural areas has a lot of challenges that result in higher costs very consistently. And then so in response, we're adding a $500 DHP bonus to projects located in the rural areas as defined by OHCS. So a project is eligible projects are the same as the rural definition that Mecca discussed earlier. Next, we're encouraging installation of smart home technologies, and we're doing that by offering a bonus incentive for installing hardwired whole home energy monitor. And lastly, we're providing an array of bonus incentives for energy efficiency measures that also have wildfire resiliency components or capabilities. And you can read up on the details and the benefits of these measures in Appendix A of the draft manual. All right, so that's it from me. So I'm going to pass it back to Mecca to discuss next steps and lead us into the Q&A. Thanks.
Great, thanks, Julia. So I'm going to wrap things up with what to expect next. As we communicated in the program email announcement, the public comment period is now open through May 31st for the draft program manual. The link for the draft was included in the email announcement for this webinar, and we'll also share it out in our post-webinar follow-up. You can submit comments to Tim Clark, and his email is listed here. And once that public comment period is closed, we will go through those comments, and our goal is to finalize the program manual and open enrollment framework by June 21st. So that's our target date. The timing is dependent on the level of public comment responses that we receive. We are hoping to launch open enrollment round 1 soon after, and we will have a webinar around that time to walk you through the specific application process. And to stay updated on all program announcements and timing of these launches of the program manual and open enrollment, I will encourage you all to make sure you're subscribed to the OR-MEP mailing list. If you got this webinar announcement, you should already be enrolled. And if not, if it was forwarded to you, you can sign up via our website. So that concludes our presentation. We'll now take questions, and I'll pass it over to Kristen, who has been monitoring those. And just as a reminder, if you have any questions, you can type them into the Q&A button.
Great, thank you, Mecca. We have received a few questions here, so I'm just going to take these in the order that they came in. The first question is, if a qualifying project wants to maximize incentives, can they actively pursue and receive both OR-MEP and Energy Trust of Oregon incentives?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'll start with, on the existing building side, we do have a co-funding agreement that was approved by the Oregon PUC to be able to co-fund the same measures between OR-MEP and the Energy Trust existing multifamily pathway. So we can help you navigate that process. Julia and the team of the energy advisors are well connected with the energy advisors from the Energy Trust side to do that. On the new construction side, we have not yet reached that point to be able to co-fund the same measure. However, we can work with you to figure out if it's best to go through OR-MEP or Energy Trust for new construction incentives.
Great, thanks, Mecca. The next question is, will projects be penalized if they don't meet the projected goals for percentage of BIPOC residents?
Yeah, that's a good question. At the moment, we don't have a mechanism like when your property is has residents in there to like we'll have a plan to ask you to follow up with you on what the percentages are, but we are trusting you at the beginning of this application state to use your best knowledge that you have and the selection that you make for the percent of residents that you're expecting that will be BIPOC. We do ask for a backup narrative to demonstrate how you will meet those goals. We'll assess sort of your selection based on that response as well, and hope you will provide like a good faith response there.
Thank you. Our next question is, what is the annual allocation limit?
Yeah, I'm gonna move back to the slide with the funding calendar. I'm not quite sure if the question is at like the overall program scale or at the project level, but I'll just recap. I can share both, and if it doesn't answer your question, please clarify. So as a whole, from 2023 to 2027, the program has 14 million that we're projecting to have be available through the public purpose charge. And for year one, open enrollment round one, we are front loading incentives for year one. So round one, we're allocating 2.5 million, and round two to another 2.5 million. And that 14 million has been distributed over that 5-year period. If you're talking about at the project level, the cap for incentives for a project is $200,000 per project.
Thank you. We have a question about invoices. So for as-built expenses of measures, now that invoices are no longer required, are updated soft and hard costs still required, and a letter from the GC team?
I can take that one. So it is not, the letter from the GC team is no longer required. We were just getting really inconsistent and sort of all over the place numbers from those letters. And so we've gotten rid of the requirements altogether. And then so just enter in the final energy efficiency plan at verification, just enter the costs to the best of your ability. And then if there's anything in there that doesn't look right to us, then we may request additional documentation or a letter from the GC. But for the most part, we're not requiring any documentation.
Thank you. One clarification question related to allocations, Mecca. It says, in the past, we could get up to $200,000 per project. Is that still the case?
Yep, that is still the per project incentive cap for projects, and typically based off of like the measures that we see at the per unit level, that cap is usually hit for larger unit size projects.
Thank you. All right, another question I think for Julia. Do ductless heat pumps also have tiered incentives for SEER EER ratings for cooling?
For ductless heat pumps, we're just looking at HSPF. They tend to sort of go up together. We just wanted to keep it as simple as possible to tier it. So we're just relying on HSPF efficiencies, the heating efficiencies.
Great, thank you. I think another question for you, Julia, related to the whole home energy monitor. Does this need to be circuit by circuit, or would sub-meters qualify for multifamily units?
Yeah, so it does not need to be circuit by circuit, as long as the intent is for the resident to be able to see in real time what their energy use is. And many of the models do calculate your averages, and maybe you're using more than usual, that kind of stuff. But it's intended for the resident to be able to see their real time usage for the whole unit. And then so sub-meter, in other words, would sub-meter qualify? So if the sub-meter, if there's a mechanism for the resident to be able to see it, and it has to be a hardwired monitor in the units, then that we could qualify that.
Thank you. All right, Mecca, a question for projects with existing reservations. How are we handling those projects, and do projects with reservations need to reapply to receive funding?
Yeah, so existing reservations will still be are still considered reserved on our end. That was based on the budget from our previous 5-year program cycle. So you can consider that reserved, and we do not need to have to reapply for that funding.
Thank you. Let's see. For projects that are currently on the wait list, can you outline those next steps for those projects, Mecca? And the question is, would they need to apply during the open enrollment period?
Yes, so you will need to apply for the open enrollment period. There are new questions that we're asking for that we didn't collect at the point of waitlist. So we do, our team of energy advisors will be in touch for all the waitlist projects. Yes, and we have the contact list for the projects on the wait list. So just stay tuned for our announcements to apply for open enrollment.
Thank you. All right, next question is related to open enrollment as well. So with the oversubscription interest and OR-MEP funding, can you give a general guidance on the minimum points threshold to apply? And the second part of the question is, will decisions on applicants that don't get awarded in the first round roll over into the next round? So if you don't receive funding in one round, will you automatically be considered again for potential funding in a future round?
Yeah, that's a great question. I guess I would start off with when I had relayed sort of the prerequisites related to timelines of when the project, if they are selected for open enrollment, if you're able to reserve incentives within 6 months of being selected and finalize your scope of work and then start construction within a year. I think that's the first question to ask yourself. And if you if you feel confident that you can meet those timelines, we would encourage you to apply for open enrollment. Given the volume of the wait list, we do anticipate that it will be quite competitive relative. We can't serve every project on the wait list currently. However, if you do apply for open enrollment, we do want to we don't know what the scores will be because we haven't collected all of this information from the projects on the wait list. But we'll have a better sense to talk to you after open enrollment closes, to let you know how your project fits among. We can't share specifics about project, but we can give you the reality of how you compare for your project against others.
Thank you. After open enrollment closes, can you share the timeline for applicants to find out if they were selected for funding?
Yeah, that's a great question. I should have included in this. I believe it's in the open enrollment draft, and our goal is, I think within at least 30 days, program team will review the applications, and then we will review them with the OR-MEP DEI coalition. After that, once we finalize our recommendations for the projects that we can fund with the available funding available, we will announce those selected.
Thank you. All right, I think we've gone through the questions that have come in so far, but please feel free to continue adding questions if you have any. Clarification on the timeline, Mecca, is the timeline starting construction 1 year after the award of funding or 18 months?
Yeah, I will go back to that slide. Yes, it is 1 year within open enrollment selection to install the energy upgrades.
Thank you. And could you go over the definition for naturally occurring affordable housing as well?
Yeah, well, while I'm there, I'll pull up the slide. So we define naturally occurring affordable housing as currently unsubsidized rental housing. This is predominantly on the existing multifamily side. I will say probably most of you on this call today fall under the regulated rental housing that are subsidized. These are properties that NOAA property, naturally occurring affordable housing, are properties that don't have a regulatory agreement to maintain a certain level of affordability for their residents for a set period of time, or rent restrictions, that such. We Historically, it is a difficult to reach property. However, we are trying to do our best effort to reach that property just with the goals of how it can impact preserving affordable housing in the state.
Thank you. Our next question is confirming that projects that are under construction but not completed are eligible to apply for funding.
Julie, you want to take that one?
Yes, sorry. So projects that are under construction but not completed is yes. So yeah, the project can be under construction, just not completed.
Thank you. Related to the 12-month requirement, if construction is ongoing but not completed, is that acceptable? So if not all measures are installed yet, but construction is underway.
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I know it's tricky to plan for new construction projects. I think we want to make sure like there is a goal that as much measures will be installed then, but we can also work with you on that as well.
Not seeing any new questions, Mecca. Happy to wait another minute or so or hand it over to you for next steps.
Sorry, I was muted. Thank you all for joining us today and for all your questions. Really great questions that we will add to our follow-up as well for those that weren't able to join the webinar. As a reminder, just stay tuned for our announcements via our program emails. And if you have any questions in the meantime, please feel free to contact us. And also you can submit any public comments that you have to the draft manual to Tim Clark at this email as well. All right, thanks everyone for joining today.
It looks like we have another question about the interactive map.
Yes, one more
And then where
question
the
came in
materials
here.
are posted. Sorry.
The interactive map appears to only be showing data at the county level. Is there a new map?
Yeah, so you have to select the census. There are different layers that you can select, and that's how you can make the selection, which is described. If you look under the layers panel, you should see like here, you want to go to the high priority area index, census tract index layer. There is a lot of information in that map because it assessed a lot more than what we necessarily pulled into this criteria, but that's how you can navigate it. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us and we can walk through as well.
Thank you. And then can you confirm if the draft materials are posted online, Mecca?
Yeah, so the public comment draft program manual is posted on OHCS's side. And that link was included in our announcement. And we will also post a recording to this webinar, these slides, and the draft open enrollment framework to the website, and we'll share it out in a follow-up email as well.
Thank you. I think that's all our questions.
All right, thanks everyone. Have a good day.